probably not. I am so excited to be spending time here with all of you. So, like I said, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to see the comments because there are now two humans blasting in live here for our book launch party. Woo! So, as we get going, as always, I want to give everyone a couple minutes to trickle in. I'm sure alerts are going off on your phones. Whether you're joining me here live on Instagram or elsewhere, super excited to be spending time with everyone. Before we dive into the book, which I cannot wait to talk about, I cannot actually believe that it's living in the world right now. I just want to take a moment, obviously, and express my sincerest gratitude. First, for every one of you out there in the community. When I say that this book couldn't have been done without you, I mean it from the wholeness of my heart. When I made that decision to create the Instagram account, July 2018, I really had no expectation of how many humans would be interested in what I had to say. And it really has been your overwhelming support here that allowed this book to even be possible. So thank you, thank you, thank you to all the self-healers out there who believe in the work and who are on your own healing journeys. And then, of course, thank you to my team, obviously Jenna, of whom is joining me here today, and everyone else behind the scenes, Fiza, Brittany, Furkan, Kim, Mike, everyone who allows this to be possible each and every day. Again, I couldn't have done it without all of you on the team here helping to support not only this book project, but really all of the work that we put out in the world. So my sincerest gratitude to each and every one of you. And then last but not least, I want to thank everyone who appears in the book. I know I speak a lot about Allie, a near and dear self-healer to my heart, who very graciously allowed me to speak of her journey in this book, and then all of the other incredible humans, and also wanting to share my gratitude with my family who's been very supportive of me speaking out in the world as I have been about my own past and my own healing journey. Those of you who follow my story know that I have had, differing evolutions of my relationship with my family, though they stand by me in support and are very graciously, like I said, allowing us to share our story in hopes of obviously spreading the healing. So I definitely want to take a moment and thank them as well. So before I turn this into an Oscar speech, I'm going to stop with all the support now and turn over to talking about the book. So I'm super excited. Jenna is here with me today. So those of you who don't know Jenna Weekland, she is obviously very near and dear to my heart and near and dear to my team. Jenna also may or may not be making a little appearance in the book herself because she's very much been on her own healing journey outside of even my orbit. And then, of course, our orbits have crossed. And now she sits here with me today and behind the scenes, day in and day out, doing the work of healing herself and now sharing her gifts with the world. So it is my honor to be sharing space with Jenna here today for our book launch event.
Thank you. And hello, everyone. It's great to say hi and be on the other side of this with Nicole. It definitely was divine intervention that our paths aligned, and it very much is represented in this book, just really the journey of healing itself. All of the tools that you constantly hear Nicole talking about and sharing on Instagram have really been compiled in such a beautiful way in this book. And I know so many people have been asking, what's in the book? What do you talk about? How is it different from Instagram? So we really just want to go over some parts that I love about the book that really just naturally is a flow of, you're new to a healing journey. What is a healing journey? And kind of chronicling, okay, well, now that I understand what it is and consciousness, how do I put these tools into place? And kind of just taking us on a conversation and overview of really some bullets in the book that we love, and really just having a free-flowing convo with you guys to give you a little bit of what is inside this beautiful book that has been a labor of love. I know personally too, seeing Nicole pour her heart and soul into this book over the last year has been incredible and phenomenal to see, and to see the love that has gone into it. It truly, truly is, Nicole, too, a masterpiece. So I know your team knows that. So we also thank you. And before I get too emotional, I want to dive into the beginning part of the book. I'm going to read some parts of it that I love, and then would love to just join you in convo. This first part, so on the cover of the book, How to Do the Work, Recognize Your Patterns, Heal from Your Past, and Create Yourself. I want to dive into in chapter 2, we're talking about the conscious self. Becoming aware. So this is actually in the book on page 25. If you have it, you guys can follow along. And Nicole writes, when people hear about my whole person approach to healing, they want to dive right in and meet their inner child, start the reparenting process, do the ego work, remove the trauma. This desire for the quick fix, emblematic of the Western culture in many ways, comes from an understandable want to end the incredible discomfort of living with these wounds. Before we can get to these deeper layers, we first have to gain the ability to witness our internal world. It may not sound sexy, but it's fundamental. Everything that follows is grounded in awakening your conscious awareness. I love diving into the book in this section because it is very important. I know as we start, when you learn of this healing journey, you just want to do. And I think one of the things here, Nicole, where you talk about, when people hear about my whole person approach to healing and what it is that you really mean by whole person.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is really, Jenna, informed by my own, obviously, experience as a human, and also my clinical practice, which for a very long time, I saw it as not really offering the full comprehensive tools for empowerment. And I saw this in my own life as someone who considered myself with ever increasing, insight and awareness. I too have been in therapy. I've laid on the couch, if you will, in psychoanalysis. So continuing to understand myself and obviously working as a practitioner in the room, attempting to help instill that level of awareness in my clients. Yet I kept finding myself and others incredibly stuck. I think that's the number one word that keeps coming up. And of course, when we're stuck, usually we're struggling in some way. We're uncomfortable. We're repeating patterns that don't serve us. And as a human myself, who was quite uncomfortable, when you read the start of the book, and I share a story where I'm crying into my oatmeal. I don't think, words really could express how deeply unfulfilled I was. And mainly because I wasn't connected to the depth of that lack of fulfillment. Yet I was struggling and I wanted to change, yet I couldn't figure out how. So it really was my own journey of understanding the very incomplete way that many of us are thinking about ourselves, with many of us maybe trying the mantra approach, the affirmation, trying to think ourselves toward being better because we're uncomfortable to different degrees, yet we can't. So really honoring, again, the places that we all come from in our despair and in our struggle. And of course, the work, the book now is my hope of giving people the toolkit, really understanding, as we'll talk a bit more, of how this is a process of healing and how I very intentionally in the beginning of the book talk a lot about, like Jenna offered, this concept of consciousness. And it's, in my opinion, it's because it's through the foundation of becoming conscious that two things become really apparent: how stuck we are and how unconscious we're living. Again, repeating the habits and patterns that live in our subconscious. And then obviously giving us the tools and the pathway forward. So I want to honor every individual out there who has met my work in one form or another, and now who may have the book or might be considering ordering the book, honoring again where you're at on your journey, acknowledging it is our natural tendency to want to plow through. Okay, I know what hurt me in the past and now I want to get better. But I'm urging everyone who might pick up this book really to settle into that practice of consciousness first. It is until we see ourselves clearly that we gift ourselves then with the choice to create change.
I love that. And if you're hearing that and thinking, coming to a place of consciousness or where to begin, that's exactly what this portion, what we're talking about here in the book, begins to go into. I know for me personally on my own healing journey as well, when you first get introduced to the work or the work of healing in general and consciousness, I personally experienced getting to a place of wanting to do. You first learn about it and it's okay, I want to heal. I want to go in. I want to get all this done right now, kind of in this quick fix. If I order food, I can find something on my phone and have it at my door in 30 minutes. And it's it's normal. And oftentimes we go into healing and also have that same desire to do this quickly. And it's I think it's written out beautifully in the book, really as a stepping stone and an introduction to the fact that this is a journey you are embarking on. If you're not already, and this is supplemental, this is giving you access to opening a door to really embarking on a longer journey that does begin with awakening consciousness and beginning a consciousness practice. And if you're wondering, how do I do that? That's exactly what this book is for, is to supplement a journey and also to open a door and to welcome you into embarking on a new journey.
Yeah, and I think as we become, that's very beautifully spoken, Jenna, and as we become more conscious, what we're able to really fall into witnessing of is our really interconnected being, the fact that we are a physical body. Again, like I described earlier, I was so disconnected from the depths of how unfulfilled I felt, because I was so disconnected for so long from my physical body. Those of you who are familiar with my work and who will pick up the book will read about my spaceship that I used to dissociate or detach myself from the very overwhelming feelings that lived in my body for so long. It was my life support. It was my raft. It was how I kept myself safe. And it wasn't until I consistently began to practice consciousness that I met my physical body and all of its sensations. And then, of course, even more complicated are our emotional centers. The fact that we have energies and hormones that course through us that, as far as I'm concerned, are messengers. They contain messages, our feelings, this whole emotional world. And then, of course, there's just so many of us that are awakening to the essence of humanity, to the reality that there is this uniqueness inside each and every one of us, whether or not you want to call it a spirit or a soul or give it a name, or just, we're all kind of, I think, falling into that awareness that there is something that makes me, that makes Jenna, makes Furkan, and really kind of embodies who we are. And as, like I said, we begin to practice consciousness, at least for me, we begin to meet those parts of ourselves. And the most frequently asked question I get from people who are discovering this essence, and I'm sure you probably heard this too, is, well, where is my intuition? How do I know what my purpose is? How do I know if I'm walking in the right direction, whether it's in my relationship or in my life, at scale? And how we meet ourselves is by becoming conscious to our full being. So what holistic work and wellness means to me, what I sincerely hope the field of psychology begins to embrace, is a holistic model of healing, really honoring that we are all living life in this human existence in a physical body. And again, we all have emotions, very natural messengers of humanity, really. And again, really beginning to honor our uniqueness. So my hope, again, is we embrace our fullness of humans and really understand that the more disconnected we are from those parts of self, the more likely we are to be stuck in the ways that we're stuck.
Thank you. I think that beautifully illuminates just the beginning of this, where it says you are not your thoughts, and like you're saying, you're not your thoughts. You're actually the soul, the being, whatever it is that you want to call it, who's actually thinking those thoughts. And where you say, when people hear about my whole person approach to healing, I think how you just spoke, that really illuminates beautifully that it is a mind, body, soul, spirit, whatever it is that you want to call it, that there is that level of consciousness, yes, in our thoughts, also in our bodies and our connectedness around us. So it's really, I think it's incredible what you are doing in the field of psychology, and just really illuminating that there is so much more in a whole person approach to this healing and what we're doing. And I think it's kind of been like a missing link or bridge that is clearly very powerful to everyone who's tuning in now and everyone who's already pre-ordered and purchased the book. I know you've been just watching you write it as well. There is something that is uniting all of us together for this teaching and this truth, that I think, whether you can put a name to it already, there's a reason you're watching this. There's a reason you've gotten the book. There's a reason a friend gave it to you. There is something already about it that is uniting us, which is very much part of that deeper whole person approach that you're talking about.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I've always said, one of the promises I made to myself in my healing journey was to learn how to speak my truth, because I really struggled in that way. And I really centered myself on the awareness that if I was able to embody my truth and put it out to the world, that it would find its way to the people. So I see that beautifully every day in the creation of the self-healers community. Now, obviously, that is transferred over into the circle and now the book. So I agree. I think that we all have found the message at the time that we needed it. And really, we're all in different places of our healing journey as well. And really honoring that space, because it is brave to begin to even consider what for many of us are new ideas, are challenging ideas. Very much as a part of my own healing journey, there was a lot of shedding, a lot of grief of old belief systems, old stories and narratives. We're going to shift into and talk a little bit about how much narrative shape our life. But I, like all of you listening, had so many of those that were ingrained in who I thought I was and in how I thought my life would play out. And time again, I began to challenge those and peel back. And within that is a lot of grief. So I just want to honor each and every one of you who, like I said, for so many of you, these are new, these are challenging messages, even though I know that you found your way here for a reason.
And even just for those seeing the back end of Nicole, and as she's written this book and has evolved in these teachings, seeing you and hearing you talk now about your intuition and finding your truth and that voice, I know since we've converged paths over the last year and a half now, it's been an honor and very beautiful to also watch you embody the work that you're teaching, because I know even now the layers that you're talking about, or the grieving, these aren't like past things. This isn't a one-stop shop where suddenly like, oh, Nicole wrote the book, she's done and she's good. These are things literally on a daily basis. As a team, as like, now I consider you family. It's a beautiful honor to witness, and also to see that too behind the scenes, going through this work in real time on a daily basis. I've seen you speaking now, and even just your essence sitting here versus how you were on camera a year ago or 2 years ago, it's been really cool behind the scenes to see, like, I think 2 months ago, it was like Nicole's new birthday because Nicole had arrived, and it was really just, it's Nicole's truth, and you're really coming into you and speaking yourself. I know everything, all the current events, just everything that's been happening over the last year, you really have taken this and embodied and gone through shedding those old beliefs. And there are still ones in present day now that it's very powerful to watch you work through, especially on such a main stage, and really to have that transparency and vulnerability. I think too is you can also really learn and gain wisdom from the book actually just by watching and listening. So also thank you.
Thank you
for sharing and for allowing yourself to evolve in front of me, in front of us, in front of everyone.
I appreciate you acknowledging all of that, Jenna, and you, everyone out there who follows the Instagram probably wonders how there can be so much content, and it's because we live it day in and day out. And now I spend
this is our life,
a lot of time with humans who are walking the same healing journey with me, and we can, all jokes aside, there are still challenges day in and day out. I know probably a lot of people do look at, someone like myself. I have my name on a book now with this idea that I am that ideal done. I think that we all look for.
It's all good now.
I'll be the first person to share with the reason why there's so much content is because there is no done. And I am still very much a work in healing progress. Even those of you who have suffered through my earliest of videos can even, I think, begin to see what Jenna's indicating, all of the evolutions that I am still working through day in and day out. So it is an honor to share my story with each and every one of you on whatever platform you meet my work. And now obviously within the covers of this book, because I do go into aspects of my past experiences that, I may not have necessarily shared thus far on any of the social media platforms that I do speak about in the book. So there's a lot of me in this, and a lot of vulnerability. And I'm someone who, on my spaceship, I was very protected from this very vulnerable space. And it is even challenging for me to, knowing that I have such an amazing resource next to me, really in all of my team, there's still so many moments where it's hard for me to ask and to say I'm struggling. So I'll be the first one to acknowledge and honor that I am still on the journey right alongside each and every one of you. And it is truly an honor to be here on the journey with each of you.
as you go into the book as well, you learn about, little Nicole and really the journey of Nicole. So there's also, while it's packed with so many tools for healing, it also is so relatable in just relating to your life and you as little Nicole and you growing up as a teenager and into college to where you are now makes it very relatable in a way where I can instantly, I think, no matter where a person comes from, we come from very different backgrounds and yet are still in the same place on a very similar path. And it's that relatability, I think, in your sharing that also gives you such access that this could essentially just read cover to cover like a fiction book, as if you're reading someone's life story. And packed in there are so many amazing tools along the way. One of which I want to dive into. This in particular, this is chapter 6. This is probably, it's hard to say a favorite because the whole book is a favorite. But the power of belief is, to me, such a powerful one that I truly love. So we're going to move a little bit forward from that place, from that sort of stuckness and that grieving. Now that we've recognized needing to dive into consciousness and our past, we're going to look at, on the cover, healing from our past. So we're going to do that in chapter 6. I'm going to read right here from the book. It's been said that we tell ourselves stories in order to live. These stories are often based in our actual experiences, believing we're desirable because we were pursued romantically from a young age. Sometimes these stories, often created in childhood, are never updated and don't reflect our current reality. Those of us like myself, who might have been a shy child, may continue to consider ourselves a shy person, even though we no longer feel or act that way. Now, let me just look here. I had some other notes up here that I wanted to read. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that. So looking at you as maybe little Nicole, or little Nicole as a shy child, and going into, you sort of embody this like belief or this narrative that you are shy. So as an adult, you're showing up from that past and those patterns as now a shy person, almost as an identity.
Yeah, absolutely. So little known fact is that I was incredibly shy. I'm sure some of you listening might see the follower count on some of my social media and think, how the hell could I be someone who is shy? Though I was a little girl who, it's a running joke in my family, used to literally hide behind my mom's leg. When strangers came into the home, I could be found under the dining room table. We all had, I think, that childish belief that if you can't see, or if I can't see your eyes, you can't see me. Yet I very much heard, "Hi, Nicole," being shouted from the other room, wishing I was invisible under that table. So I'm very, very shy in childhood. And that's just one example of many of the narratives that we begin to create about ourselves. So of course, my I'm shy narrative was born out of events where I didn't have many friends in childhood, where I was, seemingly afraid of people, not really the child who was going to have or strike up a conversation with the strangers next to me. There's so many other stories, however, that lived in my own subconscious mind about who I was, what my position in the world was going to be ultimately in life, and really about everything in life. We all create stories. Something that unifies us. I know we have quite an international community. So regardless of where you are around the world, something that unifies us as humans is our minds, our brains seek to understand the world through narratives. That's why many of us like books. We like stories. Many of us are even amazing storytellers. This is how traditions were passed down through our ancestry for a lot of us. And again, it's because we're wired to create and assign meanings to events that happen in our life. And then, of course, the more consistently an event happens, the more consistently our thoughts are validated by what happens to us, the more we become even more sure that these stories are true. I go into the book about a very helpful, yet also very unhelpful little place, little function in our brain. It's called the reticular activating system, otherwise known as the RAS, which works as a self-confirming belief machine. It's actually our mind's filter. And what it does, and we're very grateful for this function, like I said, we need this reticular activating system, because if we had, even in this one moment in time, if I had a 10 to all of the stimuli present here, there would be smoke coming out of our ears. We would be in full overwhelm as humans. So our brain, outside of our conscious awareness, has to determine what is relevant for us in this moment. What do I need to be paying attention to in this moment to continue to live, essentially? And so what my mind does is it filters out everything else, essentially. So we become a self-confirming machine. The more we practice a thought, the more it does map on to what we see, our experience in our environment, the more we're telling that reticular activating system that this is relevant to who I am. So the more that RAS then filters out anything else. And unfortunately, what it's doing for us is it's filtering out disconfirming evidence. It's filtering out the moment or the moments where something against what I believe to be true is present for us. And that's so powerful because little do we know it, and I've been doing this myself, we've been doing this our entire lives. So while I use that example of me being a shy child, that was called into question in my high school years when my mom and I began to be a little less shy. I began to have friends and I began to speak a little bit more in groups, in public. I began to, not be hiding under tables. And I have so many moments where when my mom was met with this new version of me, I would have friends over a lot. I love to have my friends at my house. And my friends would be now responding to not shy Nicole. And they would be, discussing me around my mom in particular, offering how they view me now. And I remember my mom being like, my Nicole? You're saying that about my Nicole? And that's just one example of how not only do we get locked in our stories about ourselves, but others around us do too. Obviously, the work of self-healing is to become conscious of what are our stories, first and foremost. What are the ways that we're allowing those past experiences to continue to color our current moment, typically, again, through the meanings that we're assigning to what's happening. And then obviously the meanings that we're assigning to what's happening influences how we feel about what's happening.
And those past experiences then that are creating our patterns that do create this belief around ourselves, like you had, your example as a child or that shy child, really growing into that, having it reinforced by the environment around us, it becomes a stronger and stronger narrative with this meaning attached to it. All these stories of our lives that then instills these beliefs. And you talk beautifully in the book, The Power of Belief in this chapter, specifically in the origin of belief. I want to read this paragraph out because I think it is very powerful. And for you guys who are maybe wondering, well, what is a belief exactly? Nicole breaks it right down for you in the book. What is a belief exactly? A belief is a practiced thought grounded in lived experience. Beliefs are built up over years of thought patterns and require both interior and exterior validation to thrive. Beliefs about ourselves, our personality, our weaknesses, our past, our future, are filters that are placed over the lens of how we view our world. The more we practice certain thoughts, the more our brains wire itself to default to these patterns. I think that this is so wonderfully put. I love here where you say beliefs about ourselves, our personalities, our weaknesses, our past, our future, are filters that are placed over the lens of how we view the world. And for me, I'm a very visual person. So when I read this, I think, all those old thoughts, those stories about myself, my personality, my weaknesses, my past, all the meaning I've attached to them, every single one of them is kind of like putting on a pair of sunglasses and putting on another pair of sunglasses and another pair and another pair. So now I'm suddenly sitting here as Jenna, but I have all of these layers of lenses in front of me from all of these past stories and beliefs about myself that actually in the book doing the work allows you to recognize and then break down and remove each of those one by one until you are left with your actual true self.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful, I love your visual examples.
I wish I had a bunch of glasses.
Jen always paints beautiful pictures.
I'm very visual.
For me as well. And as another visual human, I love her how she paints that. That's exactly what the case is. We are coloring our experiences. And like I said, typically what we're having the emotional reaction to is the meaning that we're assigning. So those of you who will read the book, read about one of my core narratives. So shifting away from me being a shy person, one of my narratives that my subconscious revisits time and time again and likes to paint over pretty much everything that could be happening in my current experience is this deep belief of me not being considered. That's the language that my mind has applied to pretty much a multitude of experiences. And all roads I've come to realize as I become conscious. So let's build on this foundation. Usually taking the steps, becoming conscious that, again, we're in a physical body and that have mental thoughts coloring our day in and day out. The more we're a witness to that, the more we can see these narratives as they take hold. And then, for instance, as I learn how to be a conscious witness to myself in daily life, I can begin to visually see, if you will, the themes that my subconscious continues to offer. And I speak in the book about how this really is laid down in the hardware of our brain. I'm sure by now many listeners have probably heard the statement, neurons that fire together, wire together, where that's all happening, in our brain. Neurons are firing and wiring each and every second, even all day long. And what happens is the more we fire certain networks, the more we're pumping up like iron. We're getting those networks ready to be our predominant way of narrating the world. So what I came to witness as I watched my own thoughts, so anyone out there wondering, well, how do I know? How do I know what my narratives are? We learn how to witness our thoughts. We learn how to drop in and see those in real-time narrations. And then typically you tend to see the stories that you tell yourself. So back to my most frequently visited story was I'm not considered. So I'll use a general example. I text Jenna. Jenna doesn't respond to my text. If I see her lack of response, and if I allow my subconscious meaning, which it's primed to offer, oh, well, that's because Jenna doesn't consider me. So likely in that moment, I might feel a million different things. I probably feel some version of hurt or upset. And then typically what I might do next is the thing I always do when I'm hurt or I'm upset. So for me, that's one of two things. I ignore you and act like I don't care that you're ignoring me, until, of course, I can't ignore you anymore. And then sometimes I erupt, I scream, I yell, and I ask you, why the hell? What's wrong with you? Now, that could go a much different way if same event, I text Jenna, she still doesn't respond to me for whatever reason. If I make space in that moment and say I don't offer that narrative of, well, she's not responding because I'm not considered. What if I offered a narrative of, she's not responding because she's busy doing something else, a simply objective alternate version of what could be the case in that moment? Obviously, now listeners can probably imagine if I acknowledge that something else might be causing her attention to not be on my text in that moment, as opposed to her lack of consideration for me. Now, of course, you can understand that I might allow a different feeling, and then I might allow myself to respond differently in that moment. So what I saw for myself, again, is I tended to revisit narratives. I tended to color my daily experiences with the same version of what's happening without really fact checking, without seeing if that's the case. And when we do that, that's one of the ways that we become locked. So our beliefs, right, operate down to the hardware, down to how our brains are wiring and firing. Then they kind of nudge our reticular activating system and says, here's the script that we care about. Kill anything else, 86 it, for those of you who are in the serving industry, right? And then we marry along, continuing to strengthen those narratives about ourselves. So anyone listening, like I said, the foundation of consciousness, not only does it allow us to connect to our body, to our physical self, to our emotional self, to our spiritual selves, and all of the needs that we have that are ever changing in any of those areas, as we begin to turn that spotlight of attention to our mental worlds, you'll begin to see for yourself, what are those narratives that are coloring your daily emotional reactions and then the typical way you respond? And are any of them up for modifying? Can we begin to change? Can we update? Can we begin to create space for some new feelings? And then, of course, for some new responses in the world.
And I think it's really important here to remember too, everything you're saying is so powerful. And I can see, if even just now, and as if you were on the other side, wanting that immediately, and to continue highlighting that, you didn't just snap your fingers and get here overnight. It's not like you woke up and thought, oh, I assign meaning to these stories. Okay, cool. Well, then if I don't text Jenna, or if I text Jenna and she doesn't write back, I'm just going to choose to have, a workable meaning around it. That's not necessarily the case. It is important to remember here that this is a journey. This is a practice. You mentioned something earlier that had me think, when you go to the gym, if you're new to going to the gym or you're embarking on a new strength training journey or you want to get stronger, you don't go and begin lifting the heaviest weight first. You likely won't be able to lift it. And this practice is much like that muscle where you're going through continuously in small ways to build that muscle, to practice first that layer of consciousness, simply observing, being able to see that you have thoughts and that you're not actually the thoughts themselves, yet you're thinking it. When you first have that awareness, then you're able to be in the position that Nicole's speaking of these narratives where you're able to watch them. You're able to watch your thoughts go by, and then able with practice to strengthen that muscle and then begin to get to a place where you actually can choose the meanings that you're assigning narratives and choose something that works for you. And if you're hear that and think, okay, well, great, how do I do that? I do want to show you at the back of every chapter in the book, there are actual exercises for you tools for you to take the context that you've learned in the chapter, the tools that you're learning, and then actually quite literally put them into action. You could write them right here in the book. So every time you're introduced to something or everything that Nicole just shared with you, she's then also so wonderfully at the end of that chapter created a space for, in real time, here are some prompts for you to actually embody and put that work into action. So you're already set up right away to begin practicing strengthening that muscle.
Yeah. Thank you for that very beautiful reminder, Jenna. Then I'm going to second that and offer, don't expect to believe new things about yourself overnight. Don't expect for all of everything that we've been practicing day in and day out to change. This is why for a lot of us, mantra work, affirmation work, this idea of just think a new thought doesn't actually work because our whole subconscious mind, here I'll paint a picture for us all, like Jenna is kind of rolling its eyes. It's saying, yeah, okay, that's actually not what I believe. Why would I believe these things? All of my life and probably every moment I'm living in right now is showing me evidence of otherwise. So it really is. And that's again why the book is even titled How to Do the Work. We know that our brain is capable of incredible change. We are gifted with an actual neuroplastic body, for all I'm concerned. Our brain can change. Our whole body and the way it functions can change. However, we need to do the work. We need to practice the consciousness. We need to see how we're coloring all of these old narratives past or painting it around, over what's happening now, and begin to do that less. Before we can begin to even give ourselves the opportunity to believe something new about ourselves. And of course, I'm speaking from the other side of, like I mentioned earlier, peeling back layers of belief, really challenging myself, and then giving myself the opportunity, the gift at having a new experience. Because you'll probably have maybe heard me speak this, and I'll speak it right here again. In my opinion, the lived experience, wisdom, is our greatest teacher. So I can say until I'm blue in the face and write a book about how do I change beliefs? How do I, show myself that I'm now this transformed human? And I know how it is to be human. And I know that until we do the work of witnessing, maybe for the beginning part of our journey, how much our past is coloring what's happening now, and then of course, beginning to do the work of healing, we likely won't believe it. So like Jenna said, as you embark on this journey, don't anticipate that now if you begin to identify the problematic beliefs in your world, don't anticipate that they'll go away overnight. They absolutely won't, though they can. We can begin to teach ourselves how to let in new experiences.
And that wisdom that you speak of, that inner wisdom, really, it glows from this book. And that same wisdom that Nicole is talking about is also in each of you. It's in each of us. It actually is connecting us. And this book gives you access to really kind of opening those doors, peeling back those layers so that you're able to hear your intuition. You're able to tap into that own wisdom yourself. I know I have a tattoo on my arm even that is wisdom. And that's been something that maybe to me is just like my heart that's been guiding me all along the way. I think you'll see that in this book, that everything, all these tools, all the context, everything that is in the book and then gives you tools to put into action, really is bringing you back to yourself. And the beautiful thing about that is highlighted so well in the book is that yourself is also who you begin with. You're not searching for something far out there, creating something that's not in existence. It's already here within you. And this book really is kind of, if you think of like a giant block statue and you have to chisel it away to actually get the work of art underneath, we're all sort of these giant blocks of clay or whatever it is that you want to chisel. And going through these pages, doing the work on this journey of continuous practice allows you to begin to chisel that away to really meet your true self and to meet the wisdom that is already inside of each of us. And a great segue to, and how to do that when you're thinking, okay, well, this sounds great. How do I actually begin? One big thing, you hear Nicole talk about a lot, it's in our work in the circle a lot, is reparenting the inner child. So I want to touch just a little bit before we wrap up. Towards the end of the book, this is, I think, chapter 11 is reparenting. I'm going to read you guys the definition of reparenting in the back from Holistic Psychology terms. The practice of relearning how to meet the physical, emotional, and spiritual needs of the inner child through daily dedicated action. I know you could speak for days on reparenting, so I'm going to segue this to you, and then we'll go into the 4 pillars.
Yeah, I love that you're piggybacking, and your segue was, really honoring the usness, the fullness that we all each have inside of us. Very much, very intentionally when I created that self-healers hashtag, it was really with the hopes of being a living reminder that we are all whole. So anyone listening that's living maybe in repetitive patterns, stuckness that's not serving them, my hope is to be a messenger of hope. That it's not because you're broken. It's not because something's wrong with you or you have that genetic chip that is unchangeable. It's actually, again, as a result of the habits and patterns, the environments, the experiences that you've accumulated over time. Though within each of us, there is that whole, full, well being that we can access, that we can find our way back home. A lot of the reason we're so disconnected, whether it's from our physical bodies, our emotional bodies, or our spiritual selves, is a result of what we were taught, what was modeled to us. Our very often well-intentioned caregivers' best attempts at raising us, at showing us how to be human, essentially. And I urge us all to acknowledge the humanness of those that came before. We are only able to teach or impart to others that which we know ourselves. And for some of us, a lot of this is generational. A lot of us and our caregivers and our generations before us were under such insecurity, such scarcity that physical survival was all they really could focus on. Obviously, circumstances have changed for some of us, though not all of us. Though the point being, we are all limited by that which our caregivers modeled, because we understand, or at least I believe, that everything we learned in childhood around how to care for our physical bodies, our emotional selves, our spiritual selves, was imparted to us by these incomplete humans themselves. So I talk a lot about the process of reparenting, which is honoring the fact that many of us are living in daily habits that don't serve us. That don't serve us in our uniqueness, in our unique physical bodies, that even those of us that might feel very similar to our caregivers, to our families, the reality is that we're all different. And we might not have been raised in environments that actually supported that uniqueness. That's, of course, compounded by those of us that had environments where we had trauma or wounding that we are carrying with us. So as far as I see it, in adulthood, I believe we could all use a new process of teaching new skills to our adult selves, ones that more fully honor my uniqueness. Just like Jenna, her daily habits and patterns might not look exactly like mine because she's a different human in a different body. So reparenting really is the daily commitment to showing up for ourselves in this new way, to being conscious to what our needs are in any and all of those areas. And then again, through a very process-based approach, because chances are you might not know how to. I know I didn't really, once I deplaned my spaceship and I dropped into this body, I really didn't know how to care for my physical needs. emotions were in a completely different world to me. Even those of you who, hear me speak of this, being a doctor of emotions really didn't translate to me knowing how to care for my emotional self. And I had a lot of older coping skills that I used around my emotions that didn't serve me in my relationship. So what reparenting is, just to pull back focus before we talk a bit about the pillars, it's the general process of honoring the ways in which, again, our past, what we learned in our past, is no longer serving our present. And then, of course, taking those very small steps to begin to create newer habits that will better serve the fullness of our adult experience.
I love here you highlight this in the book as well, where you say, we're constantly changing transient creatures, which, as you're talking about, even how what's unique to you is going to be different to what's unique to me. And what was unique to me yesterday may be slightly different than what is unique to me today. And it is really important, I think, to highlight, as you do throughout the book, that we are creatures. We are all humans that are constantly evolving. We are these transient beings who are continuously evolving and changing. And those needs, or those reparenting needs, which we'll go into, may also continuously evolve as we go. And I emphasize that uniqueness because, as you say here in the book too, it is helpful to know that this process is different for everyone and does not have exact linear steps. I think you highlight all throughout the book and all throughout your work and our teachings that this isn't a one-stop shop for everyone. It's also not a linear path. It's not going to look the same for everyone. My healing journey is going to look different than Nicole's healing journey. Nicole's healing journey is going to look different from each of you that is out there. So I do want to highlight that continuously as we go, that this is a practice. This is unique to you. It's not going to look the same as it does for your neighbor. And the book, specifically, like these tools that Nicole's talking about, the 4 pillars for reparenting. So Nicole's broken down reparenting into 4 pillars, which we'll go into. Each of these pillars are also going to look unique and specific to you. So really this book serves as, and all of the tools, each of the chapters, really as guideposts and really as messengers to say, here's a tool, here's kind of this box without a lid, because we're not in a closed one, but here are some guidelines and some guideposts for how to help you, how to serve you, how to supplement your journey. And then what you choose to do or not do with those is going to look different for everyone, which is perfect. Yeah. Now, the first pillar, so there are 4 pillars of reparenting that are broken down in this book. The first pillar of reparenting is emotional regulation, or the skill to successfully navigate our emotional states. Now, if you're someone who's new to emotional regulation,
as I think a lot of us, even as adulthood, are new to it, successful emotional regulation looks like having a feeling, as we will always have as humans. I love that you offered that reminder, Jenna, of we are ever changing. And our emotional states are ever changing. We don't just have a baseline where we just feel one kind of way all of the time. Like I said earlier, our emotions actually contain messages for us. We want to continue to feel about life. So what successful emotional regulation looks like is having the feels about life. Again, our goal isn't to be emotionless. We're definitely going to be reactive to things that happen to us in our given environments. However, our goal is to return to a baseline, to have the feeling, and then to go back from having the feeling. You'll see in the book, I talk about emotions lasting 90 seconds. So many of us as adults, so I was joking when I said many of us don't have that flexibility. Many more of us are getting stuck in our emotions, or all we know is either flatness, because maybe you're dissociated like I am, so you're so disconnected that it feels like you have no emotions, or maybe you're really just intimately familiar with one emotion. You're caught in a stress cycle, or you're caught in a sadness cycle. Again, the goal is to have the feelings and then to return back to baseline. A large reason, again, why we don't have those tools is because of what was modeled to us, because perhaps many of us were in environments that were way too overwhelming. So we did what we all do. We adapt. We find the way to make life as tolerable or as bearable as possible, yet we don't maybe develop the more complete set of tools with how to navigate our emotions. So again, the goal for emotional regulation is to have my feelings, whatever they might be, honoring also that they might be different. Jen and I could live a moment and I could have a reaction emotionally that she doesn't have. in that moment. The next goal is to offer those around us, our relationships, the space to have their own feelings, to express themselves, and then obviously the safety to return back to their baseline. So the gift we want to give our relationships not only is our emotions, being vulnerable, being honest. Like I shared earlier, I'm still working on how to express in emotions, how to allow others to hold space for my emotional states. And then the gift we give our relationships is by doing the same, by allowing other people to express, by me holding space for Jenna when she does have a reaction to something that might not bother me, and to allow her that room to express. And then, like I said, return back to safety. So while it's not linear, there are many tools in the book with how to get started, how to begin to learn how to navigate our emotional world, because I think it's pretty safe to say many of us are functioning in our relationships not having that flexibility, not either being connected to our own emotions or not feeling safe around others when they're having their own emotions.
And something just to note here too, as Nicole's talking about, or even using us as an example, it's not always comfy. It's still, even on a daily basis, I sometimes will still struggle to allow Nicole to hold space for my emotions. Or if I'm going through a reaction, this happened, I'm human. So I will get reactive to some things. I will get stuck in an emotional cycle. And Nicole is very wonderful at holding that space. And I notice how uncomfortable it is for me to allow another person to hold that space, because I'd rather go through my cycle. That's what I'm programmed to do. I'd rather stay stuck in that. So it also is, it feels a bit exposing, or it can feel a bit exposing and uncomfortable to allow someone else to hold that space for you as you do begin to regulate your own emotions. Also being the one holding that space. Once you're able to allow another person to do that, if I'm able to allow Nicole to hold space for me, if I'm able to put myself sort of in that exposed, I feel like I'm naked in front of a crowd and feeling really seen. Once I'm able to do that and sit through those uncomfortable feelings, I know then I'm also able to hold that space for Nicole and for those around me. So it does first take me being able to do it myself before I'm then able to do it for others. So again, it's this building block of this theme of always going back to self, going back to you, as your journey really truly does start with you. Reparenting is going to start with you and reparenting your inner child. The second pillar of reparenting, I'm looking at the clock because we could really talk about this all day. But I do want to go through the second, third, and fourth pillar since we've already started this. So the second pillar of reparenting in this book is loving discipline. This pillar involves creating boundaries with ourselves that are maintained over time.
Yes. So loving discipline really, again, applies to any of those three areas around self-care of our physical bodies, around our emotional resources, knowing when we're tapped out, when I can hold space for someone else or when I can't. And again, holding space for our own selves spiritually, building in the practices that allow me to reconnect. So what loving discipline is the not only setting of the intention to create those spaces, those moments of reconnection for myself, but holding myself to it. Knowing, right? Because a lot of us, and I'll speak for myself, be the first one included, is I got so good at not acknowledging my needs. I got so good at looking at how I need to show up for everyone else in my life, that holding myself in that space and keeping those intentions and practicing that loving discipline where I acknowledge that, no, I have needs, and that I needed to work through the discomfort of honoring those needs was an act of loving discipline. So for many of us, we can maybe take the other road. We can not be loving. We can be our own worst critics. We can hold ourselves to almost tyrannical standards. So the suggestion here is really to cultivate the loving aspect, the compassion, acknowledging and honoring the moments where we don't show up for ourselves, as we're not always going to, though very gently and compassionately beginning to allow our needs to factor in. So again, it's very individual in terms of some of us might want to really get started on the physical needs of the self and practice some compassionate, loving discipline around caring in those areas. And others might dive into the more emotional needs. Though loving discipline is the act of holding ourselves accountable, of acknowledging that we all have needs, and that it's okay and it's safe to begin to honor them in our relationships or in our environments.
I love that. And I think it's important to note when we're talking about loving discipline too, it's not morality, it's not good or bad. Like Nicole's saying, really holding space for that love and compassion for yourself is non-judgmental. Or if that judgment of yourself does come, not judging the fact that you're judging yourself and just allowing it to come and allowing it to float away. This takes us to the third pillar of reparenting. Now, the third pillar of reparenting goes hand in hand with loving discipline. This is self-care.
Yeah, so these are the actions then of creating new habits and patterns, being honest in the areas where we're not showing up for ourselves in the ways that we need. I know for me, it was getting really honest around how much am I sleeping? How much am I building in moments to de-stress or to decompress? The answer in both of those areas was not much at all. And then, of course, it's beginning to actually create the new actions, the new plans, making the bedtime a priority, hitting pause before I jump into work first thing in the morning. And for me, the morning hours were really sacred, building a boundary around that so that within those hours, I can begin whatever the practices that resonated. So for me, it was building consciousness into my day. And then it was building the moment of turning inward and trying to rediscover that intuitive space and what it was saying throughout the day. So the actioning of self-care is incredibly important. Again, it looks different depending on where we are in the journey. I definitely don't suggest you adding 5 things to that to-do list of self-care. You'll hear me go back in the book to the concept of small daily promise time and time again. It's building a new promise in one area of self-care, going to bed 5 minutes earlier, not 5 hours earlier, really beginning to create change in small ways. Because what we want in this area of self-care isn't white knuckling it where I can maybe do this, new thing one time for maybe the next 3 weeks and then life crashes around me and I can't maintain it. What we want to do is to integrate these into what we do. So now 2 years later, 3 years later, I have a morning routine. I just get up at an early time. I didn't come by that overnight. I practice keeping promises so that I could create these spaces. So again, the suggestion is don't expect life to look different now that you've listened to this talk or now that you've purchased this book. Life will not look different tomorrow, though we can set ourselves up to succeed because what we're interested in is the longevity of these promises. So picking one area that you could use a bit of better self-care and practice keeping that promise for at least 30 days, just that one promise before you build in another promise in terms of self-care.
It's building that muscle. Now, the fourth pillar of reparenting, also what Nicole's talking about, I just want to highlight in the back. So of this reparenting chapter, we will go into the fourth pillar really quick, but if the things that Nicole's suggesting, or if you want suggestions on how to really implement these things, each of those 4 pillars in the back with these action steps is broken down with suggestions. There's space for you to also get curious and create what you could implement in your day. And there, again, this book is a guidepost. It serves as a guide. There is guidance here for each of these pillars that Nicole is speaking about so that you're not just left with, oh, that sounded great, Nicole. I read the book. Okay, what do I do? This actually is a guide, as if there is a teacher next to you, really kind of taking you along the way, allowing you and empowering you to actually be your own best teacher. And with that, we'll go into the 4th pillar of reparenting. The 4th pillar, one of the ultimate goals of the work, is to rediscover our childlike sense of wonder.
Yeah, so listeners out there might wonder, if I lost my mind, kind of offering that we all have this very childlike place inside of us, even as adults. And I'm here to say that we do. Wonder, awe, being present in the moment is actually a consciousness state. Some of you might have heard to a concept called flow. Essentially, it's being here for it, hashtag, if you will. And that actually, like I said, is a consciousness state that we are able to allow the moment in, the wonder that is in the moment in, when we feel safe, when we feel grounded in our bodies, when our needs are met. Are you sensing the theme here of what we're building toward, right? When I have foundational practices where I feel whole and cared for and integrated, I now can feel safe to be. And when I am just being, as we talked about earlier, so many of us are focused on doing, on checking the boxes, on finding the thing outside and stuffing it inside. When we can just be, we can be in receipt and reception of the moment. And that's actually a very beautiful place to be. We can then allow in all that is life, all of the feelings, all of the relationships. We can remain connected to our purpose and then begin to live in purpose and in action. I believe the work that is probably drawing most of you here is that desire to either find that purpose or find that connectivity, whether it's to to your purpose or to other humans or to the collective or to life itself. And the way back is by doing the work, by being foundationally grounded to your whole self. And when you're safe in your body, when you're meeting your body's needs, when you're meeting your emotional needs, and when you're in connection to that spirit or that essence, you are in that state of wonder. You are in receipt of whatever is available to you in that moment. And you're in the position, you're in the embodiment of your self-expression. And in my opinion, that's why we're here. We're all here to do the work of healing, to do the work of changing not only ourselves, but I mean, this might sound a pretty grand, idea, but changing the world around us. And it is through being in that childlike state of wonder. We don't lose access to it. Life is here in this moment. And the more of us that can embody this moment fully, and then create the space for everyone around us to embody their true selves, that is, in my opinion, how we create the change that we're all looking for.
I obviously will echo that entirely. It can sound very broad to say, oh, well, you're out changing the world, and you actually are. Everyone who's listening, Nicole being here, my being here, Furkan behind the scenes here, each of us doing that first with ourselves, us being able to come home to ourselves and that self-expression. I know Nicole use the term, our purpose. Everyone's searching for their purpose. And it becomes a very stern, like, what's my purpose? And it's really important here, especially in this reparenting section. This fourth pillar is really beautiful, that coming back to that childlike wonder is actually just coming back to your true self-expression, which it is a dynamic of spontaneity, of joy, of imagination, of playfulness. Purpose is your connection as your true self and your self-expression, which is play. And when you're able to be and to be present in that childlike wonder, in that playfulness and authentic self-expression, that in itself is what ripples out and changes the world. The world is not going to change if each of the individuals in the world stay stagnant and do nothing to evolve or transform, which thankfully, just by nature of us living and breathing, we are doing every day. As you said beautifully in the book, we are transient creatures who every moment, every breath, every second of the day are constantly evolving.
Yeah. Such a beautiful, I think, place to end and reminder. And just like I said, I want to honor each and every one of you who are curious about what for many of us is new information. I do think in terms of that grand scale, I do think that we all are all here to do something bigger. And I know that we can love, hate all the technology that surrounds us these days. Though what I know, one byproduct of that for so many of us is the ability to live in purpose. We're not stuck in the systems necessarily as we once were. There's new systems being created around each of us and new tools to create new systems where they don't yet occur. So again, when I talk at scale like this of changing the world, I really am connected to that as being the purpose, because when we live in purpose, one of your beautiful analogies, Jenna, that I always like to share is the puzzle piece. When we are living in ourselves, in our fullness, we are living in our purpose, even if that is whatever that means in life. That could be the scale that I'm living with my immediate family. It doesn't have to be, of course, blasting to millions of people as Jenna and I are right now. Purpose ripples out. And there's so many ways that so many of us are living in purpose and we don't even realize it. And there are so many more ways that we can begin to live in purpose. Again, using these tools just by embodying who we are and allowing that to be enough in and of itself. So I believe that work that we're doing here each and every day is the scale of changing ourselves, and thereby changing all of the relationships and the world around us. So again, I want to honor each and every one of you for taking the time, for jumping on this event, for grabbing the book, for engaging your curiosity around some of this information. I honor each and every one of you, and like I said, I'm here right with you. I know Jenna's here right with you, and we're walking the same journey, and now we're doing it together. I think that's one of the most beautiful byproducts of this community. When I thanked everyone for your role in shaping this book and in helping this book become a co-creation, I mean that in my heart. It's through the safety that I continuously feel of being able to self-express in this way, knowing that I have humans that honor me and have and hold that space for me to allow me to share my thoughts and my opinions and my beliefs and my journey. I am indebted to each and every one of you, because it's through that safety that I didn't have in my past relationships that continues to allow me to embody this work and to share it with each and every one of you.
Are we still live?
Yes. Yeah, we're still live. I'm just getting the book because I know that we have
here's the book
gift that I want to.
We do have a book to give away, and for those of you, whether you have the book already or you don't know the book, this, Nicole, like you're saying, really, I know we got into this theme of changing the world, and I think I want to illuminate again, by nature of us all being here, we are each changing the world right this second, whether we want to or not, whether we're doing it consciously or not. And for someone who's already on a healing journey or embarking on one, or just has sheer curiosity, this book really is an open door to giving someone access to consciously choose, and to have the tools to learn how to consciously choose how you, in fact, want to impact yourself and your life, so that you're actually making a conscious choice in the transformation of the world, because it is happening around us, whether we're aware of it or not. And as much as we love this book, we also have been giving loads and dozens, I think hundreds of these books away to different organizations, different people, different book clubs and groups. And we have someone, I think, who is live now, Alex Sayer.
Alex Sayer. Yeah, we ran a giveaway for a free autograph copy. So I am getting ready to...
This is your book,
go
Alex.
ahead and give you my name on that book, and we'll make sure, Alex, that this book comes your way. And yeah, so to speak to Jenna's point, we are making sure that this book gets in libraries, gets in any organizations of need, any underserved areas. We want to make sure that these tools are available. In my clinical journey, I've worked in so many under-resourced, to say the least, organizations. So it is, I think, all of our team really near and dear to our heart, given all of our individual journeys, of course, to make sure that this book gets in the hands, gets in the access points of people who might not be able to afford their own copy. So definitely, if that's anyone out there who's listening, check your local libraries. If it's not yet there, we are making sure that we are calling around, and let us know if there is a library that doesn't yet have copies stocked. We invested a lot of money into our own books to make sure that we can gift them and make sure that they are all the places that they need to be. So as always, thank you all for spending this time with us. Thank you, Jenna, for sharing your time with me and your thoughts on the book. Alex, this book